So yesterday, former Packer Davante Adams went on to a podcast with his Raider teammate, Max Crosby, and they got into some discussions about the Packers, about Jordan Love, and Davante talked about whether or not he regrets leaving Green Bay. So I thought it was interesting. I've not yet watched this full clip. It's about five or so minutes where they talk about Jordan Love, supposedly, and their timestamps. That's what it says. I came across a quote somewhere on social media, just a short 30-second clip, but I want to react to all he has to say here about Jordan Love and the Packers, because I've been wondering what Davante was thinking. You know, looking at how well Jordan Love has played now, that was one of the reasons Davante seemed to want to head out of Green Bay, among many reasons. But one was that he didn't know how good Jordan Love was going to be. And I understood that when you have Aaron Rodgers and he's been your QB, then you have a young guy who's unproven. I see why he didn't necessarily want to take a risk of Jordan Love being a bad QB, but now in hindsight, it seems like he would have been fine staying from a quarterback, talent perspective. But let's listen to this, and then I'll give my thoughts as we go through. And this was on Max Crosby's podcast, The Rush with Max Crosby, posted yesterday.
You were with Jordan Love for a few years. What are your thoughts on him? Where do you see him going with his career? Because I remember after we played him, he was getting a ton of people are doubting him, and I'm like, this is cold.
Yeah, man.
Just wait till he gets his groove.
Nice. Yeah, look, I'm like the poster child for you make a decision and you live with it, at the end of the day. So I'll never regret anything. I mean, I don't care if it came here and my career went to like, you got to make decisions and roll with them. If you one of them people that gets hung up on, in hindsight, this and that, then, I mean, you'll lose your mind playing this game. So yeah. I don't regret anything, but what I will say is that, not that I doubted him in any way, because I definitely seen it. I seen the potential in there. Yeah. But it was similar to kind of what we saw earlier in the season. Is kind of what I was able to watch while I was in Green Bay. Because as Aaron's in there, all the reps that I'm getting are going to be with him. Yeah. And we built up what we built. So basing it off of that, and then having a young guy that had no experience, for me, it was tough to stay in that position and say, this is what's best for me for sure. Like, especially with all of the back and forth of everything with the Packers, contract stuff the year before. I basically told him, like, if y'all can figure this out now, going into this last year of my deal, because I had no security. I was basically playing under worse than a tag that year, last year in Green Bay. I was like the 20th highest paid receiver in the league.
Which should never happen.
It was crazy, right? So I tell him, I'm like, look, Aaron's has this stuff kind of back and forth every year. I'll ignore all of that if we can just do this a year early, knock this out, and I've proven it. I mean, I had 2 back-to-back All-Pros. Yep. I'm like, the more I play, it's not gonna make it easier on you. So you might as well just figure this out.
Numbers going up.
And then they threw some deal at me that was just like, almost was like, I barely made me even want to play for him that year. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be in camp. I told him, you're not even gonna notice that I'm irritated or nothing. I'm gonna be the player I'm supposed to be. And then I obviously went and did that. And, it raised up the stakes and made it tougher. So now the Packers wanted to figure it out, and I'm going back and forth like, how do I distinguish if this is the right thing to do versus going where I feel like is definitely the right thing to do, playing with a guy I already have experience with. We put a lot of touchdowns and yards in those 2 years we played. Yeah. Obviously, it's college, but I don't have anything to base it off of with Jordan. So I'm going off of, I'm playing the numbers, what makes most sense. Yeah. Derek was,
and I fully understand that decision. It's easy, as he said, to make, to change, have different mindset in hindsight now knowing how good Jordan Love was. But at the time, when you're Davante Adams, in the prime of your career and you're the best years you're ever going to have, I see why you could be a little bit concerned where if you don't know for certain that you're going to click with whatever quarterback, I could see why he picked the, at the time, safer option in Derek Carr, who he already had that experience with. So it makes a lot of sense. And he had to know in the back of his mind that Jordan Love could end up being a top-tier quarterback. But it sounds like he wasn't willing to take the risk when he knew he had a guy in Derek Carr that would be able to, keep him at that level and be able to find success, because they already knew, they already had that experience together, that chemistry. And it's just unfortunate for Davante that, after that first season with Derek Carr and the Raiders, that Derek Carr goes on his way, and then Davante had to be sitting there thinking, like, I came here. Part of the, one of the biggest reasons was Derek Carr, and now he's gone. He's no longer in Las Vegas. He gets stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo last year. Now when you look at the Raiders quarterback situation, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, I think Gardner Minshew can be a serviceable quarterback, but at this point, if I was Davante Adams and I had to pick a quarterback to play with, Gardner Minshew or Jordan Love, I think we all know who Davante would choose to play with at this point. And so, it makes you wonder what would have happened if he would have stayed in Green Bay. The thing is, in the long run, I think the Packers franchise is better off having traded Davante, only because of the draft capital they got in return. They got the number 1 pick in 2022 from the first round pick from the Raiders in 2022. Quay Walker was picked with that at number 22 overall. And then the second round pick the Packers received from the Raiders, they used that to trade their own second round pick to the top of round 2 to draft Christian Watson. And so far, Christian Watson has been up and down just because of his injury issues, which has been a problem. But Christian Watson, when healthy, is a very solid receiver when he gets going. And so I think to have 2 young players like that on cheap deals, the Packers getting that in return. Now you have Davante, who's 31 years old, going to be 32 in December. And so if the Packers would have played out, allowed Davante to stay and play out that entire contract, or give him a new contract and had him stay in Green Bay till around this time, sure, you would have still had Davante Adams, which, I do wonder what it would be like if Jordan Love had a guy like Davante. But Jordan got by fine with all the guys he had. Lots of players who can all get the job done at wide receiver. And so in the long run, I think it makes sense. You get a lot more. You get some youth with those draft picks. You have them on cheap contracts. And so instead of having Davante play out his career and then having, getting nothing in return, you do have a lot of, pieces that you've been able to use and build to solidify a strong future with all these young players in Green Bay. But I do wonder, what would have happened if Davante came back for one more season and Aaron Rodgers' final year with the Packers. Things could have gone differently because Aaron Rodgers was stuck with some really young talent who started clicking later in the season. But if Davante was there, they probably would have gotten off to a faster start. There's no doubt about that. Let's continue watching here.
At one point in the league, he was a MVP candidate. Like you can't say anything. You cannot like Derek personally, but you got to respect what he's done and that he solidified. My decision to come here. So that's a really wordy way of saying. At the time when I was there, I hadn't necessarily seen enough to say this is for sure what I should do. But in hindsight, like we talked about, the kid is a baller, man. I'm so happy for him, and I haven't really had a chance to truly sit down and talk with him, but I want to tell him at some point, like, I definitely don't regret changing, but I'm super proud of what you've done, and if there was a way I could pull you over here and and drag you with me like that, that would have been cool too, because obviously we saw what he did at the end of the year, but.
So Davante says he doesn't regret leaving Green Bay. He seems to like being in Las Vegas, but it sounds like he wouldn't mind if Jordan Love was his quarterback, which I can fully understand.
I don't regret what I did, but at the same time, it's definitely, you look back on it, you like, that boy got a ball. Right.
Could he be the next?
Could he be? I think he is. I think he's shown that. Yeah. And he's starting to come into his own. You can see the way he's talking in front of the media and everything. It's just like a whole different person than what I saw when I was there. Yeah. And that comes.
So even though he doesn't regret the move, you could tell that he's like, what if I would have just stayed with Jordan Love? What would have happened?
What experience?
Facts. How much of that is like him learning too? Because I've heard just through the grapevine, like just his drop back, stuff like that. They want you to mimic and mirror what Aaron's doing. Yeah. And you can kind of tell in his mechanics now, like there's a lot of Aaron in his game mixed with his own little to it.
For sure.
But so I feel like it just takes time, and that's what people don't get in this league, especially at that position.
So all in all, Davante basically saying he doesn't regret his decision, even though it seems like part of him is wondering, what if I would have stayed with Jordan Love? You can understand that in hindsight, you do wonder like what would have happened. It would have been interesting if Davante would have stayed around for Jordan Love. I know the Packers offered Davante reportedly back then more than the Raiders did, so they were willing to pay him, but it sounded like Davante didn't want to be stuck with Jordan Love in case things went poorly. I know he also talked about wanting to move closer to his family, who I believe lives in California. And so, you wonder what would have happened if he would have stayed, but it's sort of the past now. But now in this situation, Davante's sort of stuck on a team where you don't really have a top-tier elite quarterback. They weren't able to draft one in this draft. And so you just sort of have to hope, if you're Davante, that the Raiders can do enough to make a playoff push. They haven't won a playoff game in a long, long time. The past 2 seasons, the Raiders last year were 6-11, or in 2022 were 6-11. 2023 they're 8-9, and pretty quickly Jordan Love has led this Packers team to be a playoff caliber team. So if you're Davante, you probably miss out on having, being in a place where you're consistently making the playoffs, even though the Packers didn't make it, just like the Raiders in 2022. But that's what Davante had to say about the Packers. If you guys want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.